I never thought getting a simple blowout at a salon would turn into one of the most unexpectedly charged moments of my life. And honestly, if you told me a week ago that I'd be sitting in a fancy chair with someone's hands sliding down the back of my neck and feeling my heart do this ridiculous flip, I'd have laughed you off. But here I am still trying to process how a routine haircut appointment took such a wild turn. So picture this. I'm mid-20s, average guy, usually pretty low-key about grooming. I tend to just buzz my hair myself. Or, if I'm feeling fancy, I hit up the local barber for a quick trim. But last Saturday, I decided to treat myself to something a bit different. A proper blowout. You know that salon thing where your hair looks all shiny and styled, not like you just rolled out of bed. I'd been scrolling through Instagram and saw this guy with the slickest hair I'd ever seen. And I thought, why not? Maybe I'd feel a little more confident going into this new job interview I had lined up. I picked a spot in downtown, a place that looked pretty upscale from the outside with big windows and that kind of trendy vibe where you half expect to see someone typing furiously on a MacBook while sipping an overpriced latte. Walking in, the place smelled like a mix of lavender and something fresh, like after a rainstorm. The salon was buzzing, chairs turning, hairdryers humming, people chatting softly over the pop music playing in the background. That's when I met him, Leo, the guy who was assigned to me, a stylist, with this effortless charm that you can't really fake, tall, with dark curly hair that looked like it had already been worked on professionally, and these deep brown eyes that caught me off guard. He greeted me with a smile that was both warm and a little mischievous, like he knew some secret the rest of us didn't. We started talking while he washed my hair, and it felt surprisingly easy, like catching up with an old friend rather than a stranger fiddling with your scalp. He asked why I'd come in for a blowout, and I told him about the job interview, how I wanted to feel good walking in there. Leo nodded, saying he got it. Sometimes you need a little boost when you're about to put yourself out there. There was this moment when his hand lingered just a bit longer during the rinse, and I told myself I was imagining things. As he started drying my hair, the conversation got lighter, more playful. He joked about how blowouts could turn you into a whole different person, like suddenly you were a movie star or something. I laughed, and maybe I was a little more relaxed than usual, letting the warmth of the dryer and his presence calm my nerves. Then, just as he was finishing up, I felt his hand slide down the back of my neck. At first, it was like a gentle touch, almost accidental, but then it didn't stop there. It was slow and deliberate, and suddenly I was hyper-aware of every little movement. His fingers brushing my skin, the heat from his palms, the faint scent of whatever cologne he had on mixing with the shampoo and salon air. My heart started racing, and I was torn between wanting to pull away and not wanting this moment to end. I wasn't sure if he meant it as a friendly gesture or something more, but whatever it was, that simple touch flipped something inside me. I looked over my shoulder, trying to meet his eyes, and there it was, this flicker of something in his expression, something that made me wonder if maybe he felt it too. And just like that, the quiet hum of the salon turned into this electric tension between us, and I realized this blowout was going to be a lot more memorable than just a fresh hairstyle. But before I could figure out what to say or do next, Leo stepped back, smiled that same charming smile, and said, "You're all set. Go knock that interview out of the park." I left the chair with my hair feeling amazing, but my mind was spinning way more than it should have. How did a simple blowout end up being the start of something I wasn't expecting at all? Walking out of the salon, I kept running my fingers through my hair, trying to convince myself I was just excited about how good it looked. But the truth was, my mind kept drifting back to that moment, his hands sliding down my neck, and how weirdly electric it felt. I mean, I wasn't exactly expecting to get hit on at a salon, especially not in such a low-key way. I kept replaying the way he'd looked at me, that little spark in his eyes. Was I reading too much into it? Maybe, but I don't think so. The rest of the day, I couldn't focus. I had the interview the next morning, and I was supposed to be prepping, but instead I found myself scrolling through the salon's Instagram page, looking for any sign of him. Leo wasn't just a stylist. He was clearly one of those names who had a following. He posted pictures of his work, shots of the salon, and sometimes himself, always with this laid-back vibe. I even sent a follow request, and to my surprise, he accepted pretty quickly. Maybe it was just a friendly thing, but I felt like I was stepping into a new territory, and it was both exciting and nerve-wracking. That night, I couldn't sleep well. I kept thinking about the interview and what I'd say if someone asked me how I felt about taking risks. And honestly, I thought about taking a risk with Leo. It felt wild to think about, but there was something about the way he touched me, like he saw something in me that I wasn't even sure I saw myself yet. The next morning, I woke up feeling a little more confident, probably because of the way my hair looked. I caught my reflection in the mirror and thought, yeah, maybe this'll be okay. The interview went better than I expected. I nailed the questions, felt like I connected with the people interviewing me, and left the building with this lightness I hadn't had in a long time. But the real surprise came later that afternoon when I got a message from Leo. Just a simple, hey, how'd the interview go? Followed by a couple of emojis. Nothing too much, but enough to make me smile like an idiot. I replied back, and what started as small talk quickly turned into a longer conversation about favorite music, the weirdest hairstyles we'd ever seen, and what we were both looking for in life. He was easy to talk to, way easier than I expected. There was no weird pressure, just this genuine curiosity and warmth. When he asked if I wanted to come back for a touch-up or just to hang out after his shift, my heart skipped. I told him, yeah, I'd love that. Try not to sound too eager. That night, I found myself back at the salon, not for a blowout this time, but just to chill and maybe get a quick trim. The place was quieter, the vibe different under the softer lights. Leo was finishing up with a client when I walked in, and when he saw me, that mischievous smile reappeared. Back so soon? I'm starting to think you just like hanging out here. I shrugged, trying to play it cool but feeling my cheeks warm. Maybe I do. As he worked on my hair, our hands brushed again, and this time I didn't pull away. I felt the same buzz, but stronger, like an unspoken conversation between us. When he looked up and caught me staring, he didn't say anything, just gave me that smile that was equal parts teasing and sincere. After he finished, he invited me for coffee nearby. It was just a few blocks away, a little cafe with mismatched chairs and jazz playing softly in the background. We sat across from each other, the conversation flowing naturally, and I realized I was genuinely interested in him. Not just because of the way he looked or that first touch, but because he had this way of seeing the world that felt refreshing. He laughed at my corny jokes, shared stories about growing up in the city, and listened when I talked about my dreams and fears. At one point, he reached across the table and lightly touched my hand. It wasn't aggressive or overly forward, just a quiet reassurance. I felt my chest tighten in the best kind of way. It was like we were both cautiously stepping into something new but promising. By the time we left the cafe, the sun was dipping low, casting this golden light over the streets. We walked back toward the salon together, not wanting the night to end just yet. When we got to the door, Leo hesitated for a second, then leaned in and whispered, "I'm really glad you came back." I smiled, feeling like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Me too. And just like that, something shifted between us. It wasn't just about a blowout or a haircut anymore. It was about connection, about the unexpected moments that catch you off guard and make you wonder what might be waiting just around the corner. After that night, things started to unfold in a way I never quite expected. Over the next week or so, I found myself coming back to the salon more than I originally planned, not just for hair appointments, but because, honestly, I wanted to see Leo. It became this kind of light in my routine, a little escape from the stress of job hunting and the awkwardness of trying to adult properly. One afternoon, I showed up with no appointment, just hoping he was around. When I walked in, I spotted him across the room, chatting with a client, his dark curls bouncing as he laughed. I hesitated for a second. Did I look like I was stalking him or something? But then he caught my eye and waved me over like it was the most normal thing in the world. "Hey, there you are. What's up?" he asked, his tone casual, but I could tell there was something warmer beneath it. "Just thought I'd drop by," I said, trying to sound chill but probably failing miserably. He smiled, that same mischievous grin that made my stomach do flips. "You're not fooling anyone. Come sit, I'll give you a quick trim." On the house. I settled into the chair, feeling that familiar buzz again, the dryer's hum, the salon's gentle chaos, and Leo's hands working through my hair with practiced ease. But this time, our conversation was different. It wasn't about interviews or styles. It was more personal, like peeling back layers of a story neither of us had told anyone else. "So what's something about you that no one at the salon knows?" he asked, his voice low enough that I leaned in just to hear. I laughed nervously. "Wow, jumping straight into the deep end, huh?" He shrugged. "I'm good at that." I thought for a moment, then decided to take the leap. I've always been kind of scared of putting myself out there. Like, not just in dating, but in life. I guess I'm afraid of failing or messing up. His hands paused for a beat, then kept moving gently through my hair. I get that. I used to be the same way. But sometimes, you've got to take a chance, even if it's scary. I looked at him, really looked, and there was something honest in his eyes that made me want to believe him. "What about you? What's something no one knows?" He hesitated, then smiled softly. "I'm terrible at breakups. Like, I hold on to things way longer than I should." That struck a chord with me. I nodded slowly, realizing maybe we weren't so different after all. As he finished up, his fingers brushed against the side of my neck again, but this time it didn't catch me off guard. Instead, I leaned into it, letting the warmth spread through me. When he looked up and caught my gaze, he smiled that small, secret smile like he was inviting me into something only we understood. A few days later, after another late shift, Leo invited me to join him and a couple of coworkers for drinks at this dive bar not far from the salon. I wasn't sure if I was ready for something that public yet, but the thought of spending more time with him outweighed my nerves. The bar was dimly lit, a little grungy, the kind of place where everyone knows your name or pretends they do. We grabbed a corner booth, and as the night went on, the group loosened up. Leo was animated, telling stories about his latest haircut disasters and the weirdest clients he'd ever had. I laughed more than I had in weeks. At one point, he leaned over and whispered, "You're pretty good at this social thing." I grinned. "Don't get used to it." Later, when the others stepped away to get another round, Leo stayed close, his hand resting lightly on my knee. The contact felt electric, but I also felt grounded, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. "Can I be honest?" he asked quietly. "Always," I said. He looked me in the eye, serious now. "I don't do this kind of thing often. But you're different. I want to see where this goes if you do." My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. "Yeah," I breathed out. "I want that too." We stayed a little longer, talking and laughing, the noise around us fading into the background. When we finally stepped outside into the cool night air, the city looked different, brighter, more hopeful. Leo reached for my hand, and I didn't hesitate to squeeze it back. "Want to walk me home?" he asked. I nodded, feeling a smile spread across my face. As we walked side by side, the world felt full of possibilities. I wasn't just a guy who showed up for a blowout anymore. I was someone who'd taken a chance, made a connection, and maybe, just maybe, was starting something real. The walk to Leo's apartment was quiet but comfortable, like the kind of silence that doesn't need filling. The city was still alive with the usual nighttime sounds, distant car horns, the muffled laughter of people meeting up after work, the occasional bark of a dog. But it all felt softened, like we were in our own little bubble. When we reached his building, he fished his keys out of his pocket and unlocked the door. The hallway smelled faintly like vanilla and wood polish. It was cozy, with this warm lighting that made the place feel welcoming instead of just a box of rooms. "Make yourself at home," he said, gesturing toward the living room as he kicked off his shoes. I did as he said, sitting down on his couch and looking around. His place was a reflection of him, simple but stylish. A few art prints hung on the walls, one of a city skyline at dusk, and there were scattered books and magazines on the coffee table. I noticed a guitar leaned in the corner and a small stack of records near the speakers. Leo plopped down next to me, his presence close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from him. "Want a drink? I've got some wine, or beer if you're feeling fancy." "Wine sounds good," I said, and he smiled, heading to the kitchen. When he came back, he handed me a glass and we clinked them together lightly. The wine was smooth, a little fruity, and somehow it made the whole room feel a little warmer, a little more intimate. We talked for hours, about music, movies, dreams, and regrets. I told him about my family, how I'd been kind of quiet about being gay back home, how that had made things complicated. He listened without judgment, just nodding and asking questions that showed he really cared. Eventually, the conversation slowed, and the air between us thickened in that way where words start to feel unnecessary. I found myself inching closer, drawn to the way his eyes held mine steady, like he was waiting for me to make the next move. I swallowed hard and reached out, brushing a stray curl off his forehead. His breath hitched just a little, and then he leaned in, closing the gap between us. Our first kiss was tentative, like testing the water before diving in, but it quickly deepened, hands exploring, lips pressing, with a kind of urgency that surprised me. I felt a spark ignite in my chest, a warmth spreading down into my stomach. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "I've wanted to do that since the first blowout." I laughed softly, heart pounding. Me too. The night unfolded in a way that didn't feel rushed or chaotic. It was gentle and full of those small electric moments. Fingers tracing the curve of my jaw, quiet laughter in between kisses, the soft sighs when we finally settled beside each other. At one point, I caught myself thinking, how did this happen? How did a stupid haircut lead me here? But honestly, I didn't care. I was exactly where I wanted to be. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow over everything. I woke up tangled in the sheets, and Leo's arms wrapped loosely around me. There was something so grounding about that, like we'd somehow created this tiny world where nothing else mattered. He stirred awake and smiled, that same easy charm that had drawn me in from the start. "Morning," he murmured. "Morning?" I replied, feeling a strange mix of nervous excitement and comfort. We stayed wrapped up for a while, talking quietly about plans for the day and silly things neither of us had to rush toward. It was the kind of calm after the storm where everything felt possible. Later, as I got ready to leave, Leo walked me to the door. I hesitated, then turned and kissed him again. A promise, I guess, that this wasn't just a one-time thing. He grinned. "See you soon?" "Definitely." Walking out into the bright morning light, I realized that this whole experience, from the blowout to that first touch on my neck to now, had changed something in me. It was like I had been waiting for a sign that I could take a chance, that I could let someone in, and Leo had been that sign. I still had the job interview coming up, and life wasn't suddenly perfect, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face whatever came next. And maybe, just maybe, I was ready to see where this unexpected connection would take us. Over the next few weeks, my life started to look different in all the best ways, and honestly, a little bit complicated in the most thrilling way possible. Leo and I fell into this easy rhythm like two people who had been orbiting each other without knowing it for years, before finally crashing into the same space. We kept things casual at first, meeting after shifts, grabbing late-night takeout, and just talking about everything and nothing. It was weirdly nice to have someone who got the small, silly parts of my day. The way I always spilled coffee when I was stressed, or how I'd obsessively rearranged my bookshelf the weekend before. One night, after one of those marathon chats at his place, Leo did something that made me pause in a way I wasn't quite ready for. We were sitting on the floor, leaning against the couch, and he reached over to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was soft, but his eyes were serious. "You know," he said, "I really like you. Like, more than just a fling or whatever." I blinked, heart kicking into overdrive. "I like you too," I said, because I did, but also because admitting it out loud felt like stepping off a cliff. There was a quiet moment where we just looked at each other, both of us figuring out what came next. "I guess," I added, "I'm just not used to this. It's kind of scary." Leo smiled that crooked smile of his. "Yeah, me too. But maybe scary is not a bad thing." And there it was. the kind of honesty I wanted, but hadn't known how to ask for. A few days later, I finally got the call about the job. I'd been on edge all morning, checking my phone every 5 minutes like a teenager waiting for a text. When the recruiter told me they wanted to bring me in for a second interview, I nearly dropped the phone. It felt like a win, a real step forward. I called Leo right away, my voice shaking a little as I told him the news. "That's amazing," he said, genuinely excited. "You deserve this." His support meant more than I could say, especially when I was trying not to spiral into overthinking. Leo had this way of cutting through my mess, grounding me. The day of the second interview, I was a bundle of nerves. My hair was still perfect from our last session. He'd insisted on doing a quick touch-up that morning, just to boost my confidence. Sitting in that chair again, watching him work, I felt something shift inside me. Not just because of how good it looked, but because of what it symbolized. Someone believed in me, even when I was doubting myself. After the interview, I called Leo, needing to hear his voice. We ended up meeting for coffee, and I confessed that I wasn't sure I'd done well enough. He shook his head firmly. "No way, you were great, and even if you weren't, that doesn't change how talented or smart you are." His faith in me made me want to believe in myself a little more. But as things between us got closer, I realized there was this unspoken question hanging over us. How public could we be? Leo was out and proud, but I was still figuring out how much I was ready to share with the world. Part of me wanted to shout it from the rooftops, and part of me was terrified of what that could mean. One evening, after a long day, we were sitting on his balcony watching the city lights flicker. I finally blurted out, "Do you think I'm ready to be out in the open with this? With us?" He looked thoughtful, then pulled me close. "You're the only one who can decide that, but I'm here, no matter what." His arms around me felt like a shield against the uncertainty. The job offer came a week later, and it was everything I'd hoped for. Challenging, creative, with a team that seemed genuinely nice. When I told Leo, he grinned like I'd just won the lottery. "That calls for a celebration," he said, grabbing my hand. We went out that night, the city buzzing around us. As we danced in a little club, the music thumping and lights flashing, I realized how far I'd come, from the nervous guy sitting in that salon chair to someone who was daring to live fully, to love openly. Later, when we were walking home under a sky full of stars, Leo stopped and pulled me in close. "I want to be with you," he said simply. I smiled, my heart full. Me too. And honestly, I couldn't wait to see where this crazy, unexpected journey would take us next. After that night under the stars, with Leo's words still echoing in my head, "I want to be with you," things started to feel more real. Like, not just some casual, exciting fling, but something I wanted to build on. Something that deserved more than the slow and easy approach we'd been taking. I don't know why, but hearing him say it out loud made me want to stop holding back. But that also meant facing some stuff I'd been dodging. Like, how open was I really ready to be? My family didn't exactly know I was dating anyone, much less a guy. And work? Well, I wasn't sure how out I wanted to be there just yet. It felt like this tightrope walk between who I was and who I wanted to be. One afternoon, Leo and I were sitting at a small coffee shop near the salon, our favorite spot for lazy weekends. He was scrolling through his phone and I was nursing my latte, watching the steam curl up like it was teasing me with warmth I wasn't ready to fully take in. "Can I ask you something?" Leo said suddenly, looking up. "Sure." "Have you thought about telling people? Like, about us?" I hesitated. "Yeah, I have, but I'm scared. I don't want things to get weird, especially with my family." He nodded thoughtfully. "I get that, but I want you to know, whenever you're ready, I'll have your back." His words gave me a little courage, but I still felt that knot of fear in my stomach. What if telling them changed everything? Over the next few days, I found myself thinking about it constantly. Then, out of the blue, my sister called. We hadn't talked in a while. Life got busy, but she sounded upbeat, like she wanted to catch up. So I took a deep breath and told her about Leo, how we met, the blowout that started it all, and how things were moving forward. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm happy for you," she said finally. "Seriously, you deserve to be happy." Hearing that felt like this huge weight lifting off my shoulders. Maybe it wasn't so scary after all. Buoyed by that moment, I started opening up more to close friends. Leo was right there with me, always patient, never pushing. It was the first time I felt like I could breathe a little easier, like I wasn't hiding pieces of myself. One night, after a long day at the new job, Leo surprised me by showing up at my apartment with a takeout dinner and a bottle of wine. We sat on the floor, eating and talking about everything. From the weirdest client I'd had that day to Leo's latest haircut experiment gone wrong. Later, as the city lights twinkled outside my window, he pulled me close. "I'm proud of you," he said softly, "for how far you've come." I smiled, feeling my heart swell. "Thanks for being part of that." Things were good. No, scratch that. They were better than good, but life has this funny way of throwing curveballs when you least expect it. A couple of weeks later, I got a text from my boss asking if I could come into a meeting first thing the next morning. "Nothing scary, just a check-in," she said. But I couldn't shake the nervous feeling that settled deep in my chest. The next day, sitting in the conference room, my manager mentioned a new client who was very particular about, well, everything, including how the team presented themselves online and in person. It was subtle, but it felt like a hint, not about me necessarily, but about the image the company wanted to project. Walking back to my desk, I felt like I was carrying this invisible weight. I thought about Leo and how openly he lived his life, and then about the delicate balance I was still trying to maintain. That night, I told Leo everything, my fears, the pressure I felt, the part of me that worried I might have to choose between who I was and who I wanted to be at work. He listened without interrupting, then took my hand. "You don't have to figure it all out at once," he said, "but I want you to know I'm here, no matter what." His support was a lifeline, but I knew the road ahead wasn't going to be simple. In the weeks that followed, I started pushing myself to be a little braver, to bring Leo along to some work socials, to talk about him with coworkers who I trusted, to show up as more of myself. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes I stumbled, sometimes I wanted to retreat back into my shell. But every time, Leo was there, a steady presence, reminding me that I wasn't alone. One evening, after a particularly tough day, I came home exhausted and ready to shut everything out. Leo was waiting with that warm smile and a hug that felt like home. "Let's just forget the world for a while," he said. We ended up on the couch, tangled in each other's arms, and for a little while, all the fear and uncertainty melted away. In that moment, I realized that this wasn't just about a blowout or a chance encounter at a salon. This was about finding someone who saw me, the real me, and choosing to stay. And that was the kind of risk I was finally ready to take. Months had passed since that first blowout, and with them came a kind of quiet growth I hadn't expected. I wasn't just the guy who got his hair done at a salon anymore. I was someone who'd learned to take small, meaningful chances. With Leo by my side, I'd found the courage to be more myself, even when it was scary or messy. One Sunday afternoon, we found ourselves back at that same coffee shop where we'd spent so many lazy weekends. The air smelled faintly of roasted beans and something sweet from the bakery counter. We sat by the window, sunlight spilling over the table, warming our skin. Leo reached across, his hand covering mine. "You know, I'm really proud of you," he said softly. "All the steps you've taken, big and small." I smiled, squeezing his hand back. "It's easier with you around." He grinned, but there was something tender in his eyes. "I've been thinking, maybe it's time we stop dancing around things." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? What things?" He pulled a small, folded piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to me. My heart quickened when I saw it was a ticket for a weekend trip. Just the two of us. A little getaway to a cabin not far from the city. "I want us to have time to just be us," he said. "No distractions, no worries. What do you say?" I felt a rush of warmth that went beyond the summer sun streaming through the window. "I say yes." That weekend, away from the noise and expectations, we laughed more than I realized I had in months. We cooked simple meals, took long walks through the woods, and talked late into the night about hopes, fears, and everything in between. There was no pressure, no need to perform. Just two people who had found something rare and real. On the last night, sitting by the fire with the stars stretched wide above us, Leo turned to me and said, "Thank you for trusting me." I looked at him, feeling the depth of everything we'd been through. "Thank you for being patient, for seeing me." He smiled, pulling me close. In that quiet moment, I felt a peace I hadn't known I was searching for, a feeling that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Back in the city, life was still imperfect, full of challenges and surprises. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had learned that real connection doesn't come from perfection or grand gestures, but from showing up, being honest, and choosing someone every single day. Sometimes it started with something as simple as a blowout at a salon, but it grew into something that felt like home. And that was more than enough.